So welcome everybody to this meeting of the Brussels Energy Club. So my name is Marat Terterov. Most of you know me, and we are friends as well as colleagues, and have worked together on various sort of activities. And welcome to the new people also. I realize we actually have about 60 people on the registered list of participants, and around half of them are present right now. So for the benefit of the people that have not joined us, so I established this kind of discussion platform, Brussels Energy Club, almost 10 years ago now, in around about 2012. We had actually our first meeting, and in fact, Christian Clertings was actually at the first meeting with me in summer of 2012. We had a session on Russia, a very in-depth session. And Brussels Energy Club, essentially, it's a platform. It's registered as an NGO, but it's a discussion platform. We try to address, topics of interest to Brussels and international energy stakeholders, in a relatively frank, educated way. And we try to do it without taboos. We try to speak in an open way, and evaluate topics from different perspectives without any kind of dogmas and politicization of issues. So we've had this year has been quite good. We've had a good transition from the conventional meetings, which were kind of suppressed really during the COVID-19 outbreak last year, but we've now had a good transition onto this kind of virtual format, and had about 5 or 6 meetings, including 4 this year, on Zoom on this platform. And in terms of format, one thing I'd like to say is I encourage people to keep their cameras on during the discussion, because this is not a webinar. It's a meeting. And, we're going to have some very interesting presentations, but they're really kind of discussion opening presentations. The real meat, I think, is going to be in the discussion and in the kind of evaluation of the substance of, the initial presentations of Luca Giancante and Anders Marvik. So that's kind of the format. I will moderate. Nadezhda Kokotovich is here, of course, and just about all of you know her. She's now the director of the club. For people that don't know, I work full-time at the Energy Charter Treaty Secretariat, which has also become part of the decarbonization kind of debates in Brussels. There's some people see the Energy Charter Treaty as an impediment to the energy transition, and that it's a fossil fuels protecting instrument and that sort of stuff. So my organization, on a day job level is also deeply kind of captured by this whole debate on climate, energy, sustainability. And in terms of today, our focus topic, you've seen the title of the session. It's Decarbonization Strategies of the International Energy Companies. So I think in terms of today, we're going to really have, a dual side of the discussion. One side will be kind of in some ways, a case study, an experience of one, energy company, oil major, that being ENI, presenting its both strategies to reduce carbon emissions over this kind of transition period into this so-called net zero sort of period of 2050. So we're going to kind of see what ENI is doing in terms of its actions and its actual strategies to move towards this kind of net zero concept. But then when Anders Marvik joins us, who's joining us from Abu Dhabi, from ADNOC, we're going to have a look more at the NOCs, the national oil companies. And, it takes two to tango in this sense. In Europe, we're all about the Green Deal and sustainability, and, the activists more dominant, than the energy company leaders, let's say. But in the world of the NOCs, when you get outside of Europe, I think the picture is quite different. The priorities are probably very different. The growth agenda is still hugely important, lifting people out of poverty, and climate agenda is also massively important. But I think there is a different approach, let's say, to how NOCs and governments in those countries approach the energy and climate debate, let's sort of call it, the way that we see it in Brussels. So it's really a global issue. So we're going to have both sides of the coin in this meeting. And I'm really excited now that we as a Brussels Energy Club have kind of we're expanding. Zoom, while in a sense we're not meeting together physically in a room in Brussels, Zoom is giving us a lot more opportunities to outreach much further and to bring many more of you into the meeting and to hear your perspectives in the one meeting. So I'm really excited about Brussels Energy Club becoming really a kind of a global outreach platform, as opposed to just giving Brussels stakeholders an opportunity to hear from one speaker from outside of the EU, which is our often conventional format in the past. So I think that's enough from me for the introduction. So I want to now introduce our first speaker, which is of course Luca Giansanti. Now, Luca is the head of the ENI representation in Brussels, and you've got his bio on the website. But Luca is a former diplomat, and in the Russian context, they say, "Can you ever be a former diplomat?" Maybe in Italy, it's a different sort of situation. But Luca joined ENI 2 years ago. After really a long stint, well over 3 decades in the diplomatic service, and he's had some really, I think, interesting stints as ambassador. In fact, Chris Cook, we were talking about Iran, and Luca was the Italian ambassador in Iran for a few years. So I think we're going to have an interesting perspective from Luca, given his diplomatic experience. And now moving across into this corporate role. So he will outline for us ENI's vision really towards net zero, towards 2050. So Luca Giansanti, the floor is yours. I'll bring up your slides in 1 second.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marat and Nadezhda. And thanks to the Brussels Energy Club for inviting me to present ENI's decarbonization strategy. As you said, as many IOCs, or today international energy companies, ENI adopted a decarbonization strategy. We did it in 2020, and we updated it in this year in February. But actually, this strategy is part of a journey that started a few years before. I would say 2014, 15 mainly it started, but the strategy took shape after the European Green Deal came out of Brussels. And that's a very relevant, I think, point to make, because an international company, a global company like ENI that has its upstream business elsewhere out of Europe, mainly it's Africa, it's Middle East, it's the Americas, it's Southeast Asia, decided to adopt a strategy fully in line with the European Green Deal, despite the fact that, our business is really out of Europe. And I think that our peers are, despite the specificities that differentiate one company from another, doing the same thing. So we'll go through a few slides, actually roughly 20 slides, but I'll promise to be quick. We can move on to the next one. First of all, last year, ENI adopted its corporate mission. The board of directors updated our corporate mission in order, on one side, to say, first of all, that we consider ourselves an energy company, not anymore an oil and gas company. We know that the reality as of today, it's still oil and gas, but moving towards an integrated energy company. The other purpose was to introduce in our corporate mission a clear reference to the relevant SDGs, to the relevant Sustainable Development Goals, which are really part of our mission as a company. So you can see the concepts of a just transition is very present. We pay a lot of attention to the social and economic impact on a wide range of stakeholders of this transition. Preservation of the planet, sustainability, innovation. I'll come back to that as well. But also the attention to people, both within ENI and in the local communities where we are operating. Social responsibility, integrity, transparency, you'll see all that. So the corporate mission is the starting point. Then a quick overview for those of you, we can move to the next one. ENI its shares are 70% on the market, of course. So it's a public company. Italian institutions of different kinds, they own 30% of our shares. Since 2014, Claudio Descalzi has been our CEO, and Lucia Calvosa, she's the chairman of the board since last year. On the bottom side of this slide, I want to highlight a couple of concepts which are important to us. In the right corner, you'll see what we want to be by 2050. So an integrated zero carbon energy company. So moving in that direction to become, again, an integrated zero carbon energy company. On the left side, decarbonization, of course, scope 1, 2, 3 of all our products and processes. We'll go back to that in a moment. Diversification, which is already underway, but also flexibility and resilience are very important, because that's the way a company like ENI can adapt to developments that cannot be foreseen, cannot be predicted. Last point I wanted to underline is technological innovation, because this is one of the specificities of ENI, I think, technology and innovation. We do build on our own technology. We feel that the best tools in terms of technology and innovation are designed by those that can use them. So we are using our own technology to promote energy transition. This gives us a strength, I think. We have plenty of innovation inside the company, and that's the real support into moving into this journey. Next slide. I mean, ENI is present in roughly 68 countries all over the world. You can see those in yellow on the map. 31,000 people, 10,000 of them abroad. The rest is mainly in Italy. Marat, you can, yes, just stay on that one. What is very relevant to us is that abroad, I mean, we have a huge percentage of local employees, 84%. This is one of the testimony of our special relationship with the countries and the local communities in places where we do operate. Looking at the map, I mean, we said 68 countries of presence as of today, 42 exploration and production, 24 gas and LNG, 35 countries downstream activities, and 15 countries where we are in the retail business, power and renewables. But we'll go back to all these businesses and activities in a while. The next slide shows that in order to support our decarbonization strategy. Last year, ENI went through a full reorganization of our internal structure. The main feature of this restructuring was the establishing two director generals, two main structures: natural resources on one side, energy evolution on the other, supported, of course, by a number of support functions. I do belong to one of those support functions, public affairs, supported by the technology, research and development, and digital. And this new structure, but we see this structure more in detail in the following couple of slides, it's really meant to support this decarbonization journey. So let's move to the next one, just to give you an outlook, very quick one, to what is in each one of these Director General. Natural resources includes exploration activities upstream, development, operation, energy efficiency, the gas business, but also CCUS, which is a new activity for us, coming in the last couple of years, forestry, sustainable development. That's one of the other distinctive feature I'm very proud of concerning ENI. We have a kind of an NGO built, embedded into the company, helping us in doing all these social and economic development activities connected to the communities where we do operate. And then ENI Rewin, which is our company how to call it, the environmental company, providing technologies for land remediation, waste management, circular economy. The following slides, it's about the other DG, which is energy evolution, where we have put together power generation and marketing, the renewable business, and the retail business, the refinery marketing, both green and traditional, and our chemical company, Versalis. All those are brought together in order really to focus on, as we say here, on power generation from renewables, from biomethane, but also bringing together our retail portfolio together with the renewable business. We just merged these two businesses together as of the 1st of July this year, really in order to benefit from the synergies of having renewable and retail, both power and gas all together. So we move to the next slide, where it's presented more in detail what ENI will be by 2050. So at the end of this journey, thanks to our decarbonization strategy. It's a different company in terms of business targets. Let's start from the bottom, because I think that's for you, the audience, is one of the more interesting feature. Our upstream portfolio by then will be 90%, more than 90% gas. We will have 60 gigawatt of installed capacity in renewables. It's, of course, both solar and wind, but also energy from ocean waves and other technologies. We will reach 40 million tons of CO2 per year to be stored by forestry activities, 50 million tons CO2 per year in CCUS. We will have reached by then our full carbon neutrality scope 1, 2, 3. Bio refining would have by then taken over traditional refining, at least in Europe and in Italy mainly. And then retail, our customer base will increase up to 20 million clients and customers, which means more than double the present number. In all this journey, ENI is also moving much closer to the retail business, much closer to both clients and customers. I mean, meaning mainly customers are people that have a contract with Eni that provides them with power and gas. Clients are those that are using Eni's service stations, and the number is bigger. So we will be providing them a full range of decarbonized products, be them green, bio, or blue. So now about the targets. The next slide is about our net zero emission. This is one of the areas where the updated version of our decarbonization strategy this year has changed, because it's more ambitious than it used to be 1 year ago. And we have introduced intermediate targets, 2030, 2040. As you can see, those targets cover both the absolute net zero scope 1, 2, 3 in terms of GHG emissions, and also the net zero carbon intensity scope 1, 2, 3. These targets has been established thanks to a fully comprehensive methodology, which is transparent. It's on our website. So we do believe that this methodology is really solid, comprehensive, covering everything from our own activities to the scope 3 ones. And the levers to get there are, of course, as I said, carbon-free products and services, the increased share of gas on our total upstream production, biomethane for domestic use and mobility, biorefineries, circular economy. It's a kind of encompassing, I think, lever for all our businesses, blue and green hydrogen. We do believe in both, of course, and projects in CCS and forestry, RED+. So this will lead us to net zero by 2050 of all our processes and projects. Now we can have a closer look to different business activities. And if we move to the next slide, it's about renewables. Renewables today for Eni means mainly wind and solar. Actually, it's more solar, 60%, than wind, 40%. It's coming to wind, it's offshore wind in the Northern Sea, onshore wind in Italy, in Southern Europe, and the US. This is today. Today you are on 1 gigawatt of installed and sanctioned capacity. And you see there the targets that will lead us through 2030 up to 60 gigawatt in 2050. And as I said before, we are integrating right now, as of today, the renewable business with the retail business, which is very important. New technologies will also help us to get there, of course. We have our own technology for energy from ocean waves and others, but it's, of course, that would be mainly solar and wind. The following slide, we can only have a quick look to it, because it's about what I was just saying. I mean, the merging of the gas and power retail business with renewables. That's how it works. The geographical footprint of both our retail business and renewable business, it's now more and more focused on OECD countries, which means Western Europe, the US, Australia mainly. We did start actually our renewable business elsewhere, both in Africa. Kazakhstan was very relevant, but in the future we will focus more where our retail customer base is present. So mainly in those countries. So the geographical footprint will shift gradually towards those countries. Moving on to the following slide, it's still again on what I was saying, the geographical footprint of both retail and renewables. As I said, our retail customers are mainly in Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, Slovenia, and also Greece. And we will be providing them by 2050 a different array of products. So moving from conventional power to renewable and blue energy, and from fossil gas, natural gas today, to biomethane by 2050. So that will be another diversification and a major shift in our activity. Then in the following slide, we moved downstream, biorefining. Eni was the first one to convert a traditional refinery into a biorefinery. That was back in 2014 in Venice. Then a second conversion took place in 2019 in Gela, in Sicily. So now we have 2 biorefineries which are active and working in Italy. We will be getting rid of palm oil by 2023, early 2023, which means far in advance compared to the European ban on palm oil, which has been set in 2030, so 7 years in advance. And we already started to actually change the feedstock. I mean, moving from the first generation feedstock to mostly waste and residues. And we are using our own refining technology called eco-fining, which allows us to transform the organic raw materials into biofuels. We are investing a lot also on the production of biojet fuels, what is called sustainable aviation fuel, the SAF. So this is about the biorefining. From here, we move to the next slide, which is a consequence, sustainable mobility. Because also thanks to what I was mentioning before, the big network that we have of service stations, in many European countries, we offer our clients a full array of fuels. I mean, from the traditional one today to biofuels, to power for electric vehicles, hydrogen, bio LNG, bio CNG. This offer of alternative fuels and innovative services, we can really build on our important network of service stations in Italy, in Germany, in France, and elsewhere in Europe. And for doing this, of course, we partner with other companies helping us, I mean, to provide all these products to our clients. The decarbonization strategy and the transformation also concerns our chemical activities. Versalis is ENI's chemical company. I'll be very quick on this, but again, we'll see circular economy, waste recycling are really the feature that are moving the chemical industry into a new world. Our chemical activity is focused in Italy and Europe. It's mainly there. So as other companies in this industry will be moving really into a road that will lead us to 2050, where bio and recycled products will prevail. Next slide, please, Marat. Thank you. And we have now a couple of slides on circular economy, but it's only to highlight again what I was already saying. I mean, circular economy means also, among other technology, the waste to fuel technology, on how to transform the organic fraction of the household solid waste into bio-oil, but of course water, purified water and biogas, but also on how to transform the plastic waste, which is not recyclable, into hydrogen and methanol. So these are two of the technologies that we are proposing in order to manage waste of different origins. Next slide, it's about, the following slide is about the HOOP technology, which applies to chemical recycling, because of, as we know, mechanical recycling cannot take care of all the waste. So the plastic waste, so chemical recycling, it's another technology we are using. And these are really innovative technologies that are part of our diversification strategy. But probably you will be more interested in the coming slide, in the next one, which is about the evolution of our upstream portfolio. As I said, today, our portfolio, our upstream portfolio, in terms of equity, it's 50% gas and 50% oil. This will change starting from the coming years, because already in 2024, gas will be, the share of gas will be 55% of this upstream portfolio. It will move to 60 by 2030, and it will be over 90% by 2050. It will be more and more LNG. We are growing our volumes in LNG. Still, equity from gas from equity will prevail in our portfolio, and you'll see in this map our core markets. That's where we do production. Of course, Egypt, very well known since the Zohr discovery a few years ago. Then other discoveries in the East Med took place. By the way, among the features that we are proud of in ENI, it's our capacity in exploration. I think that roughly 38% of gas and oil discoveries in the last few years were made by ENI. Very proud of that. So you'll have Egypt, Nigeria, Angola, Mozambique, of course, but also Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and Australia. And the markets where we are selling all this is the Far and Middle East and Europe, of course. So this is what we see the evolution of our portfolio, gas, LNG, and of course that will affect the oil share of our upstream activities. Next slide, we are coming towards the end of my presentation. We are really very active in both natural and artificial carbon capture. The aim is, of course, to remove or to offset residual emissions that we cannot get rid of with other technologies. We are very committed in the countries that you see in the left-hand map in forestry initiatives. Only one in operation, Zambia, but many other under evaluation. What we do is not reforestation, but mainly forest preservation in agreement with, of course, local governments and local communities. CCS projects, we have a number of them, only one, which is already in operation. We are a partner in Sleipner in Norway, Sleipner projects, but we are now in a very advanced phase in the Liverpool Bay project, where we are in the storage side of the project, benefiting from depleted gas fields that ENI has in offshore. We are a partner again in the Teesside project, in the framework, that's a project that was born out of the OGCI framework. Then there is our Adriatic Blue project based in Ravenna in Italy, which is very relevant for a number of reasons to us. First of all, because as you know, I mean, CCS projects tend to be concentrated in Northern Europe and around the North Sea. We see merit to show and to practice the fact that CCS, it's also available in the southern part of Europe. So we propose a regional hub based in Ravenna, where the storage takes place in the almost depleted gas field, which are in the Adriatic Sea. They have a huge capacity of storage, up to, I think, 500 million tons globally, capturing CO2 from any owns activities, both power generation and petrochemical, but also ready to receive third-party CO2 from all the hard-to-abate industrial activities in northern Italy. Then we have also CCS, but I would call them mainly EOR projects with CO2 capture in both Libya and in the United Arab Emirates. The figure that you see on the bottom of these slides, of course, are 40 million tons CO2 per year. The per year is missing, but of course it's per year, and through forestry offsetting, and 50 million tons CO2 per year on CCS storage. That's our business target for 2050. The last few slides, the following slide shows how we are working with partners in this fight against climate change. We are partnering with a number of global international initiatives, and we do believe in this kind of partnerships, of course, because also we need a global approach, global standards in these decarbonization efforts. So that this gives you just an outlook of who are our main partners in this journey. And the very last slide, I'm almost over. It's something that we are really proud about. I mean, it's the third party's assessment of our performance, both our ESG performance, but also our decarbonization strategy. In the sense that, I mean, when last year Carbon Tracker assessed Eni to be the first among peers for the credibility, how to say, of its decarbonization strategy, we're very proud of it. But we also feature in among the very top positions in other classification and other assessments. So that's very important to us because it proves that what we are doing, it's credible, it's solid, and this helps us, I mean, in charting our way forward. I'm sorry I've been pretty long, but I hope this presentation has been useful. Of course, there are many specificities to Eni in this transition, but I think you'll find very similar features in our peers, mainly the European ones. Thank you, Marat, and everybody for your attention.
Luca, thank you very much for that. Very comprehensive, I think, sort of overview of Eni as a company.
First of all, I think the obviously, you know, from an NOC point of view, and the NOC world is very diverse. On the one side, you have my previous company, Equinor, which is probably very much in line with the ENI strategy, as Luca outlined it, very similar. Whilst now I'm working in ADNOC, which then has a slightly different take on it. So I think, you know, and if you then look across even my previous Venezuela experience, I mean, they are on a totally different planet, and they have a non-functioning country, which is a different problem. So it kind of it's a very kind of diverse picture. I think, but it's important to note that, because I think ENI is great, and it's one of the huge big partners both of Equinor and also indeed with ADNOC. So ENI has been a great partner of all the companies I've been working with, but an Equinor and ENI only represent something like 1% each or something of the oil market. You know, ADNOC being a huge big NOC, 3-4% of the oil market. So, this is a huge market. This is a huge machine that this energy transition has to deal with. And individual players, we talk about, in a lot in the press, is like, okay, if Shell and Exxon can fix the world, can fix this. No, they can't. Absolutely cannot. They have to participate in it. They have to be part of it. But alone, they only represent fractions of this huge, big energy market. So I think, but having said that, I think also our portfolios are very different. So for example, from an ADNOC in the Middle East point of view, we're more traditional oil and gas companies still. But I think let's take ADNOC as an example, or UAE as an example, you have to look at the country level. You don't have to look at ADNOC in isolation, because UAE has probably one of the biggest and cheapest solar plants being built, and huge big plants going forward. UAE just launched its first nuclear reactor for power generation. UAE is the home for ARENA and the Renewable Association. So ADNOC, you have to look at kind of UAE Inc. to start to compare it with like a Shell or an ENI. So the portfolios, the way things are organized is also quite different. But I think going forward, I think there are some differences. So kind of having those caveats, I think, and ADNOC and Aramco and some other players, we are still looking to increase oil and gas production, at least until 2030. So that's probably a big difference currently between us and at least the European IOCs. But also we're saying that because we're saying, well, look, we are the lowest emission, the lowest cost producer. So as long as the world needs oil and gas, we are there to supply the market, and we can provide more of it. Which means that, and if you believe that, and if you look at what IEA and other forecasters are saying, actually the NOCs probably will take a larger share of the oil and gas market going forward. So the rise of OPEC and others, in terms of market share, it looks to increase, which is then have different dynamics in how does the geopolitics work? How does alliances work? How does this play out? And I'm sure Christian can talk about that for hours on end on how this changes the market dynamics and the geopolitics. But there are changes coming, and that's for sure. So I think, but for me, there's something about, and of course, even though we're planning to produce more oil and gas, we're also looking into hydrogen. We are looking into forestry. We're planning to plant 10 million mangroves, which are 4 times more CO2 absorbent than a rainforest. So, we're looking at all these elements. And we have initiated a hydrogen alliance in the UAE with the Masdar, with Mubadala. We're having talks with the Japanese and the Koreans for hydrogen markets. And you can argue both from a blue hydrogen point of view, from a green hydrogen point of view, Middle East is probably one of the cheapest places to actually produce hydrogen. But again, we are ready to produce. We have set out some plans for it. Aramco's done the same thing. But again, when was the market going to develop? What's the pricing going to look like? But we are looking then, in that sense, we're looking at both blue and green hydrogen. We're also looking at CCUS. We're looking at increasing our capacity until 2030 for 5 million tons, from 800,000 tons today. So again, there are plans to expand on all this. And again, if you look at an UAE Inc., obviously with Masdar, you have a huge, big renewable player right next door to us, to which we cooperate, obviously. So again, the pictures here are quite interwoven in many ways. But what I wanted to kind of get to a little bit and kind of zoom out a bit beyond the ADNOC and ENI and everyone is, how does some of this play out? And I'm thinking about, for example, I think Christian mentioned it, what is the return here? How do you build all these projects? How do you build all this renewable, this bioenergy, whatever you do, hydrogen? What is your return? What's your yield? And just as an example, my old guys in Equinor just had their capital markets day and said, look, our capex for renewable will increase to 50% of our total capex by 2030, sorry. But in the same presentation, the CEO said, by the way, we have lowered our return expectation for that portfolio. So you're telling the market we're going to spend more money, which is great because it's green, it's aligned with energy transition, but at the same time, we're saying we're going to earn less money. So how does shareholder react to that? And I think in another aspect of this, which is then the oil price volatility, I think oil price volatility will not go away. We see prices surging again. We might have a spike. It might go down again. So this volatility in the oil and gas market will continue to be with us. And how does that play out? So let's say we have a super cycle now, which many people talk about. Well, then shareholders would like BP and Shell and Exxon and ENI because you're going to have a huge cash flow. How does that play out? Should you tell your shareholders that, well, we're really making a lot of money on oil and gas, but we're still going to switch to renewable, and how fast are you going to do it? Again, there's a timing element here. And of course, and then for the different players, there are different pressures. So for example, ENI, Equinor, in the European IOCs have much higher pressure than a UAE player, maybe than a Chinese player. So again, societal pressure changes how some of these companies react and how quickly react. But again, and another factor which kind of leads into this increased volatility is what's the potential for underinvestment? And I'm thinking underinvestment both in oil and gas and renewable. I think on renewable, we are not, as the global energy system, are not building enough renewable energy at all to stay in line with Paris Agreement or IEA forecast at all. So we're behind the curve on investments. At the same time, you can argue for oil and gas because of the crisis we've been through, because of energy transition, because of a lot of different reasons. There's also seemed to be a potential underinvestment in oil and gas, which again could cause a spike in prices and increase that volatility. So if you kind of combine all of this, you're looking at this, what I say, kind of VUCA world. You have increased volatility, increased uncertainty, more complexity, and more ambiguity. So how do you then play in that? As a politician, as a CEO of a company, where do I put my money? Where do I make my investments? What are my shareholders saying? What's the public saying? What's the politician saying? And if you're a politician, which policies do you put forward? Do you do a carbon adjustment tax? Does that hurt your trade? So there's a lot of trade-offs here. So sometimes when we read the IEA report, you think, there's a smooth line into the future, we just follow it and everything will be fine. And of course, the world will not look like that. There will be cycles, there will be volatility. And I think, and in all this, there will be winners and losers, whether that is on country level or company level or industry level. And I don't think that is necessarily clear who will win over time, So just kind of one of my favorite numbers from the IEA report, I have to mention it because Luca reminded me of the CCUS. So CCUS today, this is just kind of one number out of the IEA report, which to me tells a lot about how we should interpret the IEA report. So on CCUS, currently the world has something like 19 big commercial projects, total capacity 40 million tons a year of CCS captured. Great. We're not using all that capacity, but at least we have 40 million ton capacity. ENI has planned to increase, ADNOC has planned to increase, we all have planned to increase. Now, and one of the big projects in Europe right now is the Northern Light project with Equinor, and most of the European IOCs are in it. And they plan by 2030, I think phase 2, to have a 5 million ton project. So 5 million tons sequestered per year. Now, go back to the IEA report. In the report, it says, by 2050, the world has to have a CCUS capacity of 7,600 million ton. Today, we have 40 million ton. That means that the world has to increase by the Northern Light project, so 5 million ton, every week for the next 30 years. And clearly that is not going to happen. So again, you can make forecasts into the future. You can make a pathway to net zero. You can make a pathway to stay on track, on Paris track. And the question is not whether we agree, whether we should do it or not. Of course, we have to take climate change seriously. We have to have this energy transition. But I think it's going to be much more volatile, much more uncertain, and all the nice curves is not really going to take us there. So, you know, I think so that's where I want to leave you. That I'm sure there are comments on that, and there's a lot of issues arising out of that. But I think we have to be, at least in rooms like this, and with colleagues online in this kind of fora, you know, we have to be realistic. Not because we don't want energy transition to happen, but we do want it to happen. So what needs to happen in addition? Because we can't just assume all these things are going to happen if they are not happening in reality. And the track record that the IEA still has says we're not on track to almost any of those elements, whether that's renewable, whether it's CCUS, energy efficiency, on all the kind of main pillars, we are behind as on a global level. So I'll stop there and I'll open the floor. Marat, you're muted.
Yeah, I've unmuted. Anders, thanks very much for that. I think a short and sweet kind of overview, and maybe two main messages that I pick up from what you say. One is that, you know, the whole sustainability, let's say, debate and the policies ensuing in the OECD countries, Brussels and beyond, is kind of playing into the favor of the NOCs, and that the NOCs will actually probably take, I mean, they already have the lion's share of the market, but basically they will probably have an even bigger share of the market because, you know, some of that oil production that Eni no longer produces, and the BPs and these sort of companies will probably have to picked up, you know, by the NOCs, assuming that the overall demand is growing and continues. And I don't know to what extent there's indication that it will decline, given on what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, Martha, I think there will be oil kind of peak. It won't be because of supply, as mentioned before. It will be on demand. Now, when that will be, whether that is in the 2020s and the 2030s, you know, and there are different opinions on that. But I think on most scenarios, the peak is not a peak like Matterhorn. It's more like a bump, you know. So I think you can argue, some people argue we're already past peak demand. Some people say, well, the demand is going to come back post-pandemic, you know. But I think, if this oil supply and oil and gas are kind of tapering off relatively slowly, at least in the beginning, again, I'm talking about share, not necessarily the total market. We know the energy market will increase, where the oil and gas will probably decrease, at least in the 2040, 2050. But again, there will be quite a lot of oil and gas. So how do you make investment in oil and gas in this period where you're no longer necessarily growing, but there's still a big market?
Sure. But that was the first point. And then the second point that I picked up from you, and I think this is going to lead into a comment from Chris Cook. I see he sent in into the chat, you know, quite a nice comment. But I think the second point is that I remember in 2008, you know, the oil price reached a certain peak. You'll remember, I think it was just before you came to Brussels, but it was about 150 per barrel, 144, I think, in July 2008. Christian Clertings will remember the history of the oil price better than me. But I do remember that everyone was talking about market volatility. Everyone was really concerned about, you know, how the high oil price is just going to, you know, create a lot of uncertainty into the market and a lot of tension between suppliers and consumers. But it seems to be now that the whole climate and sustainability, environment is creating even more volatility. I mean, that's the message that I got from you.
I don't know if it's more volatility, but at least continued volatility. I don't think the volatility will go away. Then you can argue how much, but I think you're touching in upon something there, which is, it's a good point. We talk about how solar, wind, renewables have and the cost have gone down, and they have gone down dramatically, more than most people would thought they would, which is great. I think, but also don't underestimate the oil and gas industry's ability to lower its cost. Sure. I mean, when we had high oil prices, we also had break-evens probably in around $70+ Today, some of the, if I use Equinor as an example, they went from, I think, $75 when oil prices were high, and now they're currently running at something like $30 break-even. So again, and that's a, more than 50% reduction in oil price you need to break even. That's a huge change. So again, and I think as a lot of the solar and wind costs have come down, they will start to taper off. They will even start to become volatile themselves, because if we have a commodity boom now post-pandemic, iron prices, aluminium prices, a lot of the raw materials going into whether that's a Tesla or a windmill or a solar panel might also go up and be volatile. So I think these kind of forever declining cost curves and renewable might not stay with us forever either. Now, a renewable probably will stay relatively cheap on a new build basis. But again, I think one question I didn't touch upon is, one thing is attracting investment. One thing is the cost level. And of course, then you can argue how much the return, how much, in the Equinor case, they said when the return will go down. But let's just say the return stays the same. Let's say investments are there. How many kind of projects are ready to be invested in? Do we have enough and that's one of the arguments from where I go, again, my friends in Equinor. They are struggling to find all these projects, to find the next offshore wind project, the next onshore wind project, the next solar, so kind of, it's not whether the money is there. It's not a question of, is it the cheapest project or not? It's, can we get enough of these projects? That's another huge, big concern, which I think is going to be a big, big bottleneck going forward.
Chris Cook, would you like to come in? I see your comment in the chat about the transition from a resource capital intensive intermediate economy to a smart market.
Well, this is something that came up, you'll remember, Marat, to the World Energy Forum in Istanbul.